The world of processed foods is no stranger to harmful additives, and foods from the 70s were no different. Here are the best foods from the 70s that got banned due to unhealthy side effects. Let's start with something that was harmful, but people thought was not too bad if they even knew about it. One of the most widely used sweeteners back then was cyclamate. It would be used in soft drinks that children and teenagers regularly consumed, as well as all kinds of canned fruit. You could not even escape it in salad dressings, not that people were trying to back then. As we said, it was hard to know the effects of these things, since a lot of concise studying hadn't been done. Plus, it was a really good sweetener and was a key factor in the taste that made a lot of products sell. On October 18th in 1969, it was found that it posed a risk of cancer as well as nerve damage, and it was thus banned from use nationwide. Maybe food tasted more bitter as a result, but we imagine constant medical torture to be worse. Moral of the story being, there is nothing that tastes good enough to warrant even a 0.1% risk of cancer. Another artificial menace was the super popular food dye, Red No. 2. And trust us when we say the name is appropriate, since this raised all sorts of crimson flags in medical tests. Amaranth, as it is legally known, was first legalized in 1906 because it was quite cheap and easy to produce, and you needed just a few specks of the dye to give a vibrant color. It was used in cooking as well as several cosmetics and makeup products, so this thing definitely got around in more ways than one. Unfortunately, Soviet scientists found that this also posed serious risks of cancer if people continued to use it regularly. When we tell you people were pissed, it is an understatement. You know they got Mars to stop making red M&M, even though there was no dye in them? It was not long until it got banned in 1977, and people became more aware of the risks of what is actually in their products. Red No. 2 might have been out of the picture, but Red 40 was already on its way to sneak into people's systems and cause an unwarranted scene. If you ever grew up eating maraschino cherries, which you usually could buy at the store, you might have remembered how awfully bright-looking they were, which was all thanks to the dye that was used on them. That same dye had a pesky little carcinogen in it called benzidine, which got these sweet cherries a bad rep for being linked to allergies, migraines, and mental issues in children. The lesson here might be that not everything that tastes sweet ends up being nice, but a lot of poor children and adults alike genuinely could not have known better. JellO gelatin is a pretty tasty treat for an even better price for those who remember it. But did you know how many artificial sweeteners and harmful dyes were loaded in this one? If the past few names on the list were bad to you, then this might cause you to stop and think for a bit. A lot of additional stuff used in the gelatin, especially lots of food dyes for its various different flavors, were pretty harmful and caused skin issues as well as bloating, stomach discomfort, and nausea. With the way people consumed them, these otherwise lighter symptoms spiraled out to the point where, long-term, people's immune systems were going down the drain. This made them vulnerable to a lot more than just one specific type of health nightmare. Luckily, there was a push for gelatin products with no food dyes in the market, and brands like Kroger responded with new lines of JellO without all the worrisome fake stuff. In the 70s, the phrase, "let's get some shark fin soup," was not really that out of pocket. A lot of people enjoyed bowls of this at many restaurants across the USA, but local shark populations had to pay the price in a pretty nasty way as they got their fins removed and then were left in the ocean. While they were a tradition in some cultures, their use was not nearly as intense as the businesses constantly asking for more fins. Eventually, the Senate passed the Shark Fins Elimination Act, which thankfully now makes shark fin products illegal. Over the years, the constant efforts by hunters and other people looking to make a quick paycheck have endangered species, and today the number of sharks is at a record low. Speaking of traditions, one long-held custom in upper society and luxury cuisine was Beluga Caviar, as you may have heard. The USA had an infamously high appetite for it, consuming around 60% of the world's caviar, but that meant that, like sharks, beluga sturgeons were not safe in their own waters. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had to ban the buying or selling of any beluga products, as the fish today faces a serious threat of extinction because of overfishing. It might be tasty, but there's certainly no need to fish enough of them to wipe their entire gene pool clean. At least we think that's the sane take. Caviar is still one of the most widely consumed luxury cuisines in America, but Beluga Caviar has been effectively banned from mass production. Who knows? Maybe one day the rest of the caviar varieties may suffer the same fate. This trend of exhausting an entire populations of animals for culinary thrills had spread to a lot more than just life beneath the sea. An example is foie gras, which was created by having ducks and geese go through a rather harmful diet of corn. To the point, they were force-fed the corn to ensure that they were fattened up properly. The damage this did to their livers cannot be stated in simple words, but the livers were the main part, so the market saw no reason to stop its routines. California was one of the first states to step up about it and ban this activity, even though the move got backlash. But even the Supreme Court rejected a case for removing the ban. Hopefully, the rest of the country takes a hint too, because the act of foie gras is quite unethical. Fortunately, most states have now banned force-fed and harmful diets for animals and thus automatically deemed foie gras illegal. Kosmarga, luckily, was not an animal species that was almost wiped out, but a vintage Italian cheese that involved sheep's milk, which was heated and then curdled for 3 weeks. Now, this gave it one hell of a flavor and a sensation that other cheese just could not hold a candle to, but the process was beyond icky. Within 3 weeks of curdling, flies would be drawn to the milk and they would bombard it with their eggs, naturally turning into maggots. The maggots would then eat the milk, which had rotted a fair bit by now, and then let out some kind of substance that gave Kosmarga its fame. For a lot of people, this might be too much, and that's definitely a fair hill to die on. Luckily, the government is one of those groups, and it banned this cheese for not meeting health standards. Bushmeat, on the other hand, is something that carries a natural risk to it. No human interference needed this time. This is an umbrella term that refers to all kinds of animals caught in the wilds of Africa for daily sustenance. And when we say all kinds, please take that to heart. Bats, lions, as well as monkeys, literally nothing is off the table. These wild animals carry diseases with them. And during the Ebola outbreak from 2013 to 2016, governments started banning the hunting and consumption of bushmeat. It is still smuggled in illegally, though, and it goes for a pretty hefty price. Another delicacy that is native to West Africa is Aki Fruit, which in Jamaica is a widely consumed treat and is even their national fruit, but in America is currently banned by the FDA. This is all because Aki Fruit, as tasty and soft as it can be, contains hypoglycin, which is a toxin that can cause an allergic reaction you really would not see coming. Let's just say it feels like one of the worst hangovers of your life, and that may be why the sickness caused by Aki Fruit has a name. In the world of medicine, it is lovingly referred to as Jamaican vomiting sickness, but do not let pretenses fool you. If too much of it is consumed when it is very ripe, the fruit can very well be fatal. Hence why there's such a tight ban on it. Orlans suffered the worst of animal cruelty in a way that really makes you realize no dish is ever worth that kind of torture to another being. Orlans themselves are these very small songbirds that get imported from France, and they really are about the size of an average thumb. Orlans were prized for their flavor more than anything else, and eating them was considered to be a pastime of royals reserved exclusively for them. The way it would be prepared was sick, with the tiny things first being blinded to be overfed and then being thrown in brandy before they got marinated live. That's enough to make us lose our appetite for sure, and luckily it was banned in 1999 due to animal abuse. Nobody can go without margarine, the all-time quintessential breakfast food that everyone from everywhere, both in and out of the US, can agree on. One of the more relaxing parts of spreading big dabs of margarine on your toast is knowing that it is not really bad for you, and that should be the case by all means until you add trans fats in. These fats would be put into the spread, and this was an industry-wide practice until it got banned by the FDA as it became linked to heart disease and diabetes. In particularly extreme cases, it puts you at a higher risk for cancer, and that is just too much trouble for butter of all things. Sassafras trees are deeply cherished cultural items because of their solace in the symbolism of many cultures, as well as the infamous sassafras tea that we keep hearing people raving about. A cup of this in the 70s was all you needed to fix your soul and wipe away the exhaustion of last week. However, the tree and tea itself may not be so healthy. The tea at least contains a carcinogen called safrole, which is found in large amounts in the tea, thereby making it pretty unsafe as well as a bad idea if you have any pre-existing breathing problems. Besides, some studies found that the root bark of the tree and the oil it secretes can be linked to cancer or liver damage. Maybe we should reevaluate how healthy this piece of foliage is? Pawpaw Seeds are another exhibition that proves not all of nature's bounty is to be treasured, and there are parts of indeed Mother Nature herself that are actually pretty bad for children. Pawpaw seeds have been linked to nerve damage and liver damage, and this is all because of a toxin called ananac. The government would ban pawpaw seeds as well as advising the public not to eat the skin of the fruit, but naturally very few actually paid attention. We are not sure how many hospital trips have been induced just because of the seeds of this fruit, but the takeaway is definitely to not eat every part of whatever fruit you happen to find. Haggis is a pudding that is made from some pretty different ingredients than your usual cinnamon apple concoction that your grandmother whips up. This one has sheep hearts, liver as well as sheep lung mixed together with spices, onions, and oatmeal of all things. A weirder combination for a pudding may not be discovered, at least by us, for a long while, but apparently this dish was very popular. How it fits into the definition of a pudding is a bit beyond us, as it sounds more like a porridge, but whatever it was, people finished bowls of the stuff. Sheep meat has a risk of carrying a disease called scrapie though, and that is why the FDA banned any kind of sheep lung products in America, as that had the highest risk. Lungs of most animals are probably not safe to eat. Just a guess. So, let's take a look at milk. This should not be too bad, right? It is one of the first things humans ever took from the planet, and one of the things we have been consuming since forever. Unfortunately, unpasteurized milk can be pretty risky, and this was a surprise to most people. Naturally too, because nobody really associates health concerns with milk. But people in the 70s used to drink it raw, which was the problem. This caused enough cases of bacterial contamination that the FDA eventually banned the sale in virtually all states. It is not legal to sell milk in grocery stores if it is raw, and any raw milk purchasing is done strictly on farms now. Raw milk cheese went through pretty much the same ordeal as milk when it got banned for almost the same charges. Anything should be Googled or at least researched somewhat if you are going to consume it raw, especially things that go through an entire process like cheese. Cheese made from raw milk had much higher chances of food poisoning and stomach issues in the populace, even though it led to the cheese being thicker overall. These small differences, which give businesses a USP, are often not worth dealing with all the pain that might come as a package deal with them. For a little texture and flavor, you may open yourself up to a dozen downsides. Trans fats were unfortunately not just prevalent in margarine production, but many other foods like fried roll pulls as well, which meant that culling the problem all across the American nation may be more challenging than the government initially thought. Basically, if something had liquid oil becoming solid fat, it had trans fats, and that means it had a health risk worth considering. Fried roll-ups happened to be a delicious snack that many people would enjoy in their free time or when they found a stall with the fragrance of a good roll-up. Although businesses like that would suffer the same as margarine producers did when the FDA put a lid on the entire situation with trans fats, and we cannot be happier that they did. Look, it is not like we do not enjoy our fair share of fried food, but the fried roll-up pulls just had too many trans fats for something that was available readily and fast. One would assume that even more obvious than raw milk are the negative consequences of smoking. But just like how vaping today is marketed as a less dangerous alternative to tobacco and nicotine, Clove cigarettes were meant to be a healthier option to go for if you wanted to smoke. The thing is, whether you get your nicotine from a machine with a coil or cigarettes made from dried cloves, also known as Kretex, the danger is still the same. Actually, in this case, it was probably worse since studies proved that clove cigarettes contain more tar, nicotine, and carbon monoxide than traditional cigarettes. Every single Kretek was the equivalent of maybe 2 cigarettes in a sense, and that definitely does not scream healthier alternative to us. It is a good thing America ran an intensive anti-smoking campaign and conducted many prominent studies, because if the side effects were still unknown up till now, like they were in the 70s, we would be having even worse variations, which hopefully can make you understand why those anti-smoking ads were so rigorous. It became a serious problem for America eventually. The very last item on our list is candy cigarettes, which you should not mix up with candy-flavored cigarettes. These were actual candies that were shaped like cigarettes and made out of sugar, chocolate, and bubble gum wrapped in edible paper. They had powdered sugar lacing the wrapper too, which made it possible for the user to puff a cloud out, but instead of smoke, it would be sugar. The entire product was meant to imitate the experience of a smoke and hopefully work as a crutch to help people quit, but it only had the opposite effect. Many critics thought it was making children numb to cigarettes, increasing their curiosity in the substance, and causing those who already have smokers in the home to be more likely to try it. There was a lot of controversy surrounding these candies, and it did not help that they were marketed so similar to cigarette brands. All in all, not a good look for a product aimed at kids. Eventually, they were banned as part of the efforts to eradicate smoking. And we gotta say, there are a few things in history America has been as thorough about weeding out as its brief fling with smoking. That wraps up our list for snacks, foods, and products from the 70s that are now banned. If you enjoy our content, hit the like button for more vintage